Texas frontier, winter of 1882. The wind screamed through the pines like a knife, carrying with it a sound that froze Sam Carter in his saddle. He pulled his horse to a halt, one hand tightening on the reins, the other dropping instinctively to the Winchester strapped beside him. Out here, any strange noise could mean ambush, wolves or worse. Then he heard it again, a weak, rasping moan. Sam dismounted slowly, boots crunching on frozen earth. Ahead, slumped against a thorny brush, lay a figure wrapped in a torn hide cloak. An old Apache woman. Her lips were cracked, her fingers purple from cold, but her eyes sharp, unyielding, snapped open when he stepped closer. She spoke through the rattle of her breath, voice low but cutting clear. "You want a wife? My daughter is perfect for you." The words hit Sam like a hammer. Out here, in the killing cold, this was no plea, no delirious rambling. It was deliberate. His grip on the rifle tightened. Trick? Trap? Desperation? But before he could answer, the woman brought two fingers to her mouth and whistled. From the tree line, another figure appeared. A girl. Young, barefoot. Her deer-hide dress hung in tatters, clinging to a frame both fragile and strong. Her dark hair, woven in braids with feathers and leather ties, swung over her shoulders as she walked. The way she moved measured, silent, spoke of pride forced to live alongside weariness. She stopped beside her mother, staring at Sam. No words, no begging, just presence, defiant, desperate, dangerous. Sam's chest tightened. He had sworn never again. Since the fever took his fiancée years ago, he had built walls of timber, stone, and silence around his ranch and his heart. No strangers. No entanglements. No more losses. And yet here they stood. He could ride away, leave them to the wolves, the storm, the inevitable. That was the sensible choice, the safe choice. But the girl's eyes held him still, not pleading, daring. Sam clenched his jaw, tugged the reins, and growled the only words he could force past the storm raging inside him. "Follow me." Neither woman spoke. They simply obeyed. Step after step through the snow, toward the ranch that had been his fortress of solitude. Sam felt the weight settle heavy in his chest. Whatever he had just allowed through his gates wasn't leaving. The ride back was long and silent. Snow fell in thin needles, stinging Sam's face as he led his horse along the frozen trail. The old woman leaned against the saddle blanket he'd wrapped around her, breathing shallow and uneven. The girl, her daughter, walked barefoot through the frost, leaving dark red smears where her skin cracked against the cold earth. She never winced, never asked for help. Sam forced his gaze forward, jaw clenched. He had no business dragging strangers to his land. His ranch was survival, not charity. Yet, for every step they followed, he felt the ground shift beneath his world like fate had chosen for him the moment that whistle cut the air. By the time they reached the clearing, dusk had fallen. Smoke curled from the chimney of his cabin, the only sign of life on the wide, desolate ridge. A mule brayed in the corral, the sound sharp against the hush of winter. Sam pushed open the heavy wooden door. Heat spilled into the night, the glow of the fire casting long shadows across the single-room cabin. He stepped aside. The girl entered first. She moved without hesitation, kneeling before the hearth and holding her hands out to the flames. For the first time since he saw her, a tremor rippled across her shoulders, whether from cold or relief, Sam couldn't tell. Her mother shuffled in behind her, leaning against the wall, eyes scanning every detail of the room as if weighing its worth. Sam shut the door, the latch falling heavy. For years, this had been his fortress, a place of silence, where nothing entered and nothing left. Now, two strangers breathed his air. He felt it in his chest, as suffocating as it was undeniable. He cleared his throat. His voice came out rough, unfamiliar to his own ears. "Stew's on the stove." They ate without words. The old woman slow and steady, the girl with controlled hunger, careful not to spill, though her jaw tightened with every bite. Sam watched them from his chair, the firelight cutting across his face in harsh lines. When the bowls were empty, he pulled blankets from the storage chest and spread them near the hearth. "You can sleep here tonight." The old woman gave a single nod. The girl lowered her gaze but said nothing. Later, when the cabin fell quiet, Sam sat in the corner chair, shadows flickering across his rifle on the wall. The girl lay curled beside her mother, her torn dress clinging to skin marked by faint bruises. Sam's eyes hardened. Someone had hurt her. He didn't ask who. Not yet. The old woman's voice broke the silence, raspy but clear. "They call me Ada," she said. She placed a hand on her daughter's shoulder. "Her name is Sona." Sam gave a slow nod. No more. That night, he lay awake in the dark, staring at the low rafters, listening to the breathing of two strangers who now shared his roof. He had spent years alone, guarded by silence. But now something had entered, and he knew it was never leaving. The wind howled against the cabin all night, clawing at the shutters like a restless animal. Sam lay awake, boots still by the door, eyes fixed on the ceiling beams. Across the room, the fire burned low, throwing dull light over the two figures on the floor. The girl Sona was curled tightly against her mother. Ada's chest rose and fell in shallow, uneven breaths. Each cough rattled through the quiet, a dry sound that made the hair on Sam's neck stiffen. At dawn, Sam rose. He moved quietly, setting water to boil on the stove. But the sound of coughing followed, sharp and unrelenting. When he turned, he saw Sona kneeling by her mother's side, one hand steadying her while the other pressed a cloth to her lips. Ada's skin looked waxen in the morning light. Her eyes, dark and steady the night before, now glimmered faintly with fever. "She needs rest," Sam muttered. His voice was low, as though speaking too loud might shatter what little strength the woman had left. Sona's gaze flicked toward him. Her eyes were tired, ringed in shadows, but unyielding. "She needs more than rest," she said softly. "But we have nothing else." The weight in her tone struck Sam harder than he expected. It wasn't desperation, it was acceptance, carved deep by years of loss. He stepped outside, the cold slamming against his chest. The sky was iron gray, snow thickening along the ridge. He split wood with more force than necessary, each strike of the axe echoing across the frozen land. But no matter how he tried, he couldn't drown out the sound of that cough in his mind. When he returned, the cabin smelled of smoke and damp wool. Sona had propped her mother on blankets near the hearth, coaxing her to sip from a tin cup. Her hands moved with care, every gesture practiced, deliberate. Sam set the wood down. His eyes lingered on the bruises along Sona's arm, faint but visible as she adjusted the blanket. They told a story she hadn't shared, one he wasn't sure he wanted to hear just yet. Ada stirred, her voice weak but sharp enough to cut the silence. "You're quiet," she rasped, her eyes pinning Sam with unexpected force. "That's good. Men who talk too much, they do nothing." Sam said nothing, only gave a slow nod. Her thin hand gripped his sleeve. Despite her frailty, there was iron in her touch. "She'll be alone soon," Ada whispered. Sona stiffened. "Don't," but Ada silenced her with a look. Her gaze never left Sam. "She's strong, but she don't know how to stop surviving." The words dug deep, rooting themselves in Sam's chest. He swallowed hard, jaw tight. "She won't be alone," he said finally. His voice was steady, but it cost him. The old woman released his sleeve, sinking back into the blanket. Her breathing slowed, her eyes closing as if satisfied with the answer. Sona sat in silence, her hand resting gently on her mother's arm. She didn't look at Sam, but he felt the weight of her trust, fragile, unspoken, dangerous. That night, as the storm raged outside, Sam sat awake in his chair, rifle across his knees, watching the fire burn low. Sona lay beside her mother, shoulders trembling in the glow of the embers. For the first time in years, Sam felt something pierce through the walls he'd built around himself. Responsibility, fear, and the quiet, unyielding pull of a bond he hadn't asked for yet couldn't deny. Morning came with no sound. No birds, no wagons, no voices, only the faint crackle of dying embers in the hearth. Sam knew before he even opened his eyes. The kind of silence that filled a room after something ended, it pressed against his chest like a weight. He rose slowly, boots whispering against the floorboards, and looked toward the fire. Sona was kneeling beside her mother. Ada's body lay still, her chest unmoving, her face slack with the peace of sleep that would never break again. One of Sona's hands rested on her mother's, The other brushed back a strand of gray hair that had fallen across her cheek. "She's gone," Sona whispered, her voice flat but steady. Her eyes were red, but no tears fell. Sam's jaw tightened. He gave a slow nod, then turned wordlessly to fetch his coat. Outside, the frost bit deep, the ground hard beneath his boots. He began to dig. Each strike of the shovel cracked the frozen earth. His muscles burned, his breath turned to smoke in the cold air. But he didn't stop. He didn't think. He couldn't afford to. By midday, the grave was ready. When he returned, Sona had dressed Ada in a clean deerskin wrap. She had braided her mother's hair with strips of leather and tied it neat. Ritual in every gesture, duty in every breath. "I'll carry her," Sam said. Sona didn't argue. She only stood aside as he lifted Ada's frail body into his arms. She weighed almost nothing, too little for all she had endured. They walked through the pines, the snow crunching beneath their boots, until they reached the clearing Sam had dug. He laid the old woman down into the earth as gently as if she still lived. No preacher, no prayers, just silence. Sona knelt in the snow. Her lips moved in Apache, a whisper too soft for Sam to catch. Then she stood, arms crossed tight, her face carved in stone. Sam shoveled earth back over the body, each thud of soil muffled against the silence. When it was done, the grave stood small and final against the white snow. "She loved you," Sam said quietly, his voice rougher than he meant. Sona didn't answer. Her chin trembled once, just once, before she forced it still. Then she turned and walked back toward the cabin. That night, the cabin felt emptier than ever. The fire burned high, but the shadows pressed close. Sona sat in Sam's chair, Ada's blanket wrapped tight around her shoulders. She looked smaller than before, fragile in a way she had never allowed herself to be seen. Sam watched her from across the room, something knotting in his chest. Finally, she spoke. "She told me not to become hard." Her voice was low, almost a confession. "Not even after everything." "You're not hard," Sam said. "You don't know me." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I know what I see." Her eyes flicked up, searching his face, as though weighing the truth of his words. Slowly, she exhaled, the tightness in her shoulders loosening just slightly. When she rose from the chair, she didn't walk back to the fire. She crossed the room toward him, quiet, steady. She stopped close enough that he could feel her warmth. "If I stay," she whispered, "you need to understand something. I'm not broken. I'm tired. There's a difference." Sam nodded once, his voice low. "I know." Her hand lifted, resting lightly against his chest, just above his heart. Her eyes glimmered in the firelight. "I don't want saving," she said. "I just want to stop running." His hand came up, steady on her waist. "Then you already have." For a long, fragile moment, the cabin was silent except for the fire's crackle. Two lives that had been shaped by loss stood face to face, not as strangers anymore, but as something neither could name yet, something dangerous, something real. The cabin was too quiet without Ada's breath in it. The fire burned steady, but the silence pressed heavy, making every creak of wood sound louder, sharper. Sona sat curled near the hearth, her knees drawn to her chest, the blanket slipping from her shoulders. Her long braid had come undone, strands of dark hair falling across her face. She wasn't crying, she hadn't cried once since the grave, but her stillness said more than tears could. Sam sat in his chair, watching her. His fists were tight on his knees, his chest heavy with something he couldn't name. Finally, he stood. His boots thudded softly across the floorboards. When he stopped beside her, she didn't move. She just stared into the flames. "You don't have to sit alone," he said. His voice was low, uncertain, like a man afraid of breaking something fragile. Slowly, Sona looked up. Her eyes caught the firelight, dark, tired, but sharp. "I've always sat alone," she whispered. "Not anymore," Sam said. The words hung between them. He almost regretted saying them, but then Sona shifted, setting the blanket aside. She rose to her feet, close enough that the heat from her body cut through the cold air between them. "I told you," she said quietly, her eyes never leaving his. "I'm not broken. I don't need saving." I know, Sam answered. But maybe you don't have to carry everything alone anymore. Her breath hitched just once. Then she lifted her hand and touched his cheek, light, testing, like she expected him to flinch. But he didn't. He leaned into it, rough stubble brushing her palm. For the first time since she'd walked out of the trees, Sona's lips curved. Not a smile, not really, but softer, easier. Her voice was a whisper. I'm not afraid of you. And good, Sam murmured. His hand found her waist, steady, careful. You never should be. And then, without warning, she leaned in. Their lips met, not desperate, not rushed, but slow. A kiss made of firelight and silence, of trust earned without words. Sam's hand slid up her back, pulling her closer. Sona's fingers curled in the fabric of his shirt, holding on like she'd been waiting too long for this moment. When they pulled apart, their foreheads rested together. Her breath was warm against his jaw. She whispered, I'll sleep in your bed tonight, but only to rest. Sam swallowed hard, his chest tight, his voice steady. That's enough. That night, she lay curled against him, her head on his shoulder, her hand resting over his heart. And for the first time in years, Sam closed his eyes without the weight of emptiness pressing down. Not alone. Not anymore. The wind outside howled like a living thing. Snow battered the shutters, whistling through the cracks in the cabin walls. But inside, the fire burned hot, throwing shadows across the rough-hewn beams. Sam sat at the table, oil lamp flickering at his side. He'd been sharpening his knife, but his hand had stilled long ago. His eyes weren't on the blade, they were on her. Sona was across the room, hanging her dress to dry by the hearth. She wore only one of his shirts, the fabric loose, slipping from her shoulder. The glow of the flames caught the bronze of her skin, the curve of her collarbone. She moved without hurry, but every small motion cut into him like she'd been carved to fit this place, his life, his loneliness. She turned, caught his gaze, and didn't look away. For a long moment, neither spoke. The storm outside roared, but between them was a silence heavy with meaning. Finally, Sona crossed the room, her bare feet padded against the wood. She stopped in front of him, close enough for him to feel her warmth, to smell the faint smoke in her hair. Sam, she whispered. He set the knife down, stood slowly. His chest tightened with the weight of restraint. You sure about this? His voice was rough, almost breaking. Sona's hand lifted to his chest, fingers tracing the scar at his collar. Her touch was steady, unafraid. I've been sure since the day you carried my mother through the cold, she said. I don't want saving. I just want you. The last of his resistance broke. His hands closed around her waist, pulling her against him. Their lips crashed together, no hesitation this time. Heat surged between them, stronger than the fire at their backs. Her fingers tangled in his hair. His hands slid down her back, gripping her like he might lose her if he let go. She pressed closer, her curves fitting the hard lines of his body. The storm outside raged louder, but inside there was only the sound of breath, of need, of surrender. Sam lifted her effortlessly, her legs wrapping around his waist. He carried her to the bed in the corner, laying her down with a care that didn't match the urgency in his chest. She pulled him down with her, her eyes fierce, unblinking. Don't be gentle, she whispered. Not tonight. And he wasn't. But he was true. Every kiss, every touch was a vow unspoken that she wasn't a burden, wasn't a curse, wasn't alone. When the storm finally began to fade, they lay tangled beneath the blankets, breathless, her head resting over his heart, his arm wrapped tight around her, as though even sleep might try to take her away. Sona's voice broke the silence, soft, steady. I'm not afraid anymore. Sam kissed her hair, closing his eyes. You never had to be. And for the first time since Elizabeth's death 5 winters ago, he let himself drift to sleep with someone in his arms, knowing morning would not steal this away. Morning came softer than the storm had left it. The snow outside glittered in pale light, but inside the cabin it was warm, thick with the scent of firewood and coffee. Sam woke to find Sona still in his arms, her head pressed against his chest, her breath slow and even. For years he had opened his eyes to silence, to emptiness, to the ache of grief. Now, There was warmth. Now, there was someone. She stirred, blinking at him with sleepy eyes. Her lips curved faintly. "You're staring." He smirked, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I've earned it." For the next week, life shifted. They worked side by side mending fences, hauling wood, feeding stock. At night, they shared a bed, not just for warmth but because neither could stand the distance anymore. Her laughter came easier. His silences grew softer. The cabin no longer felt like a prison of solitude, but a place alive. Yet peace was never meant to last long on the frontier. One afternoon, while Sam sharpened tools outside, Slate's ears flicked toward the tree line. The mule's low bray broke the quiet. Sam straightened, hand instinctively brushing the revolver at his hip. Three men on horseback emerged from the pines. Their coats were worn, their faces harder than the cold. Sam recognized the look: drifters, maybe ranch hands cut loose, maybe worse, men with nothing to lose. The tallest of them tipped his hat lazily. "Afternoon, neighbor." Sam's jaw clenched. He didn't answer right away. Behind him, the cabin door opened. Sona, stepping onto the porch. She froze at the sight of the riders. The man's eyes slid to her, and his grin widened. "Didn't know you had company out here. And Apache company, no less. Times really are changing." Sam stepped forward, blocking their view of her. "State your business." The man chuckled, nudging his horse closer. "Relax. Rancher. Just passing through. But I'll admit she's a fine sight. Bet the boys in town would pay good money to see her pour whiskey at the saloon." Sona's breath caught, but her chin stayed high. She didn't flinch. Sam's hand dropped fully to his gun. His voice came out low, steel-edged. "You said you were passing through. Do it." The man's grin faded, replaced by a glint of challenge. For a long, tense moment, the only sound was the creak of leather and the wind across the snow. Then, with a mocking tip of his hat, the riders turned their horses and disappeared back into the trees. Sam didn't move until the sound of hooves had faded. When he finally turned, Sona was still standing there, eyes steady on him. "They'll be back," she said quietly. "I know," he replied. His hand tightened around the revolver at his side. "But they'll learn fast this isn't a place you take from." That night, as the fire crackled, she pressed against him in bed, her hand resting lightly over his heart. Neither of them spoke of the riders again, but both knew the silence wouldn't hold forever. The morning was brittle with cold, the kind that snapped branches and made breath sting in the lungs. Sam swung the axe into a log, the crack echoing sharp across the clearing. It paused, listening. Too quiet. Then hoofbeats. He straightened, gripping the axe. 3 riders broke from the tree line, the same drifters, their horses steaming in the cold. This time they didn't bother with lazy greetings. Their eyes were hard, their hands close to their guns. Sona stepped out of the cabin, a bucket in her hand. She froze when she saw them. The leader, the tall one with the scar across his chin, spat into the snow. "Told the boys you were playing husband with an Apache. Didn't believe me. Had to come back and see." His gaze slid to Sona, lingering too long. "She's wasted out here." Sam planted himself between them. His revolver was already loose in its holster. "You're not welcome." The man smirked. Funny thing about welcome, doesn't mean much when a man's outnumbered. The other 2 chuckled darkly, shifting in their saddles. Sam's voice came out low, steady as the weight of the sky. 3 men don't make me outnumbered." And for a tense moment, no one moved. Then the scarred man's hand twitched toward his gun. Sam didn't wait. The crack of his Colt split the air, a flash of fire against the snow. The scarred man reeled in the saddle, clutching his shoulder with a snarl. His horse reared, screaming. The others drew fast, but Sam was faster. Another shot dropped one into the snow, blood steaming against the white. The last rider turned his horse hard, panic driving him back into the trees. Silence crashed down, broken only by the ragged breaths of the wounded man, writhing in the snow. Sam stepped forward, revolver still trained. His boots crunched slow and deliberate. "You ride back to town. You tell anyone else who thinks to come here that this land is mine. My woman is mine. And if they try, they'll leave colder than the ground they're buried in." The man's eyes burned with hate, but fear ran deeper. He staggered to his horse, clutching his bleeding shoulder, and rode off into the trees. Sam didn't lower his gun until the last echo of hooves was gone. Only then did he turn. Sona stood on the porch, face pale but steady, her hands gripping the railing. Their eyes met across the snow. No words passed, but the message was clear. Danger wasn't gone. It had only just begun. The town of Abilene never forgot a story, especially one that smelled of blood. By the time Sam rode in with Slate 2 days later, the streets were already buzzing. He felt the stares before he tied off the mule. Men leaning against storefronts, women pausing at the well, even children froze mid-play to watch the rancher step down. Whispers ran like wildfire. That's him shot 2 men by the creek. Heard he's keeping an Apache woman out there. Not keeping, living with. The weight of it pressed against his back as he walked toward the general store. Inside, the air was thick with silence. A clerk he'd known for years wouldn't meet his eyes. A pair of farmers near the stove muttered low, their voices like burrs under cloth. One word kept breaking through. Apache. Sam set his jaw and placed his list on the counter. Flour, salt, kerosene, and nails. 2 pounds. The clerk moved slow, fumbling with the ledger. His hands shook. Finally, he glanced up. Folks are uneasy, Sam. About what? About you. About her. They say she's bad luck. Say she'll bring trouble down on everyone. Sam's voice was flat, iron hard. She's brought nothing but work and peace to my land. Trouble came from men who didn't know when to keep their distance. One of the farmers laughed under his breath. Peace? Is that what you call it when you put 2 in the ground? Sam turned, eyes narrowing. 1 in the ground. One walked away breathing. And I don't miss when I don't want to. The farmer swallowed, his grin faltering. The room stayed quiet after that. When Sam stepped outside with his supplies, Sheriff Harlan was waiting. Broad, gray-bearded, hand resting casual on his belt. His eyes, though, were sharp. Heard about what went down, the sheriff said. Men come back half dead, running their mouths. You want to tell me your side? Sam's gaze didn't waver. They came to my land, talked filthy to my woman, reached for iron. I ended it. The sheriff studied him, chewing slow on the inside of his cheek. Finally, he nodded once. Don't figure you're lying. But you've stirred a hornet's nest, Sam. Some folks don't care for the idea of you and her under the same roof. They'll get used to it. Or they won't, Harlan said. And that'll mean more men riding your way. I won't ride out to save you every time. Sam hefted the sack of flour onto his shoulder. Never asked you to. Their eyes held a long moment before the sheriff stepped aside. Sam mounted Slate and turned for home. The stairs followed him all the way down the street, whispers chasing his back like dust in the wind. By the time the ranch came into view, dusk was falling. Smoke curled from the chimney. Sona stood in the yard, hair loose in the fading light, waiting. He dismounted slow, set the supplies down, and looked at her. They know, he said. Her eyes searched his face. And Sam's jaw tightened. And they won't forget. The quiet stretched between them, heavy as the winter sky. Then Sona stepped closer, laying a hand on his chest. Let them whisper, she said softly. We'll still be here when they're done. For the first time that day, his shoulders eased. But deep down, Sam knew the storm was only gathering. The nights grew colder after the trip to Abilene. Sam kept the fire stacked high, but it wasn't the flames that warmed the cabin, it was Sona. She moved with quiet grace through his home as if she had always belonged there. She mended shirts, stirred stew, swept the floorboards smooth, and yet it wasn't the work that steadied Sam's heart. It was the sound of her voice at dusk, the touch of her hand brushing his arm, when words weren't needed. One morning, he woke to find her already by the hearth, hair loose and glowing in the orange light. She looked over her shoulder at him, lips curved faintly. You're watching me again, she teased, though her voice carried no sharpness. Can't help it, Sam said, rising. They shared breakfast in silence, but her eyes lingered on him differently that morning. She had something to say. It came later, as she stood by the window, palms resting against the wood. Sam, she said softly, I think I carry your child. The words dropped into the room like a stone into still water. Sam froze, every muscle tightening. You're sure? Not yet, she admitted. But I know my body. I feel different. And Sam rose, stepped across the room, and placed both hands gently on her waist. Then one slid lower, pressing against her belly, steady and protective. His voice came rough but certain. I didn't plan for this, he said, but I'm not afraid. Her eyes brimmed, though she held herself firm. Do you want this? I want you, he answered. Whatever comes with you. For the first time since he'd met her, she let tears fall openly. They weren't born of sorrow, but release. She folded into him, arms tight around his chest, breathing against his shirt as though anchoring herself to his strength. That evening, Sam opened a drawer he hadn't touched in years. Inside lay a small cloth bundle. When he unwrapped it, the firelight glinted on a thin silver ring, polished smooth though plain. I made it a long time ago, he said, voice low. It was meant for someone else. She never wore it. He looked at Sona then, not with hesitation, but with resolve. I'm not asking for papers or a preacher. I just don't want to pretend anymore. You're already mine. Sona's breath caught. Slowly, she reached for the ring, slid it onto her finger, and nodded once. And you're already mine. Sam let out a breath he hadn't known he was holding. He drew her close, their foreheads touching, the fire crackling steady beside them. That night, she slept in his bed, curled into him, his hand resting over her stomach. For the first time in years, Sam felt not just alive but building something worth staying alive for. Outside, winter still held the land in its iron grip. But inside the cabin, spring had already begun. The thaw came late that year. By March, the snow had retreated into muddy ruts, and the land smelled of wet earth and pine. Sam had begun cutting ground for planting when the sound of horses reached him from the ridge. He straightened, axe in hand, eyes narrowing. It wasn't the steady plod of a ranch hand returning from town. It was faster, urgent. 3 riders appeared against the pale sky, their silhouettes sharp against the horizon. Dust rose beneath their hooves as they descended the slope, angling straight for his gate. Sam wiped the sweat from his brow and waited. His dog barked low from the porch, hackles raised. Inside the cabin, he caught a flicker of Sona's figure in the window. She had seen them too. The men reined up hard at the fence, their leader tall, broad, with a scar cutting from his temple to his jaw. His hat was tipped low, voice rough as gravel. Morning, he called. Name's Clay Donner. We're looking for something that don't belong to you. Sam didn't move. You'll have to be more specific. Clay grinned, showing a gold tooth. Word says you're harboring a stray. An Apache girl. Tribe cast her out for a reason. We aim to take her back or make use of her ourselves. The air turned cold, though the sun still shone. Sam's hand tightened on the axe handle. He felt the weight of every winter, every loss, every choice that had led him here. She doesn't belong to you, Sam said evenly. She belongs to no one but herself. Clay spat in the dirt. That's where you're wrong. A woman like that, she's a prize. Men'll pay for her, one way or another. Behind him, one of the riders let out a laugh. The sound was sharp, ugly. The door to the cabin creaked then. Sona stepped onto the porch, chin lifted, hair dark against the pale sky. She said nothing, only met the men's eyes with steady defiance. Sam's gut tightened. He shifted forward, planting himself between her and the riders. His voice dropped low, hard as iron. You'll ride off my land. Now. Clay leaned on his saddle horn, smirking. Or what? Sam raised the axe, the blade catching sunlight like fire. Or you'll find out why men in this valley stopped testing me years ago. The silence stretched taut. Wind tugged at the grass. Horses stamped, uneasy. Finally, Clay chuckled, slow and dark. We'll be back, farmer. You can't swing that axe forever. With a sharp tug on the reins, he turned his horse. The others followed, the sound of hooves fading back over the ridge. Sam didn't lower the axe until they were gone. Only then did he glance back. Sona still stood on the porch, face calm, but her hands were clenched white at her sides. He walked to her slowly, voice softer now. They won't touch you. She met his eyes. They'll try. Sam looked past the ridge where dust still lingered. His jaw set like stone. Then let 'em come. This land's ours, and I'll kill before I let them take it. As the dust settles on this tale, what lingers most is not the danger at the gate nor even the bitter winters of the frontier, but the quiet strength of two people who chose to face life together rather than alone. In Sam's silence and Sona's courage, we find a reminder that companionship is not about ownership, but about standing shoulder to shoulder when the storms come. Many of us know the feeling after loss, after betrayal, after years of carrying burdens alone, of wondering if there's still space in our lives to trust, to care, or to begin again. This story whispers back that yes, there is. Their struggles on the wild edge of the West carry a lesson far beyond that place and time. That dignity is preserved when we treat others with respect, and that healing comes not from denying pain but from walking through it together. For older listeners, perhaps widowed, divorced, or living with long memory, the reminder is sharp and hopeful: love is not confined to youth. It is built, plank by plank, in kitchens warmed by fire, in gardens tilled by hand, in the patience of listening and the courage to stay. And perhaps the truest part of this Wild West love story is that survival turned into belonging, and belonging blossomed into legacy. Each of us can see some reflection of our own life here. Maybe it's the way Sona carried her mother until the end, or the way Sam laid down his solitude when the moment came. Perhaps it's simply the truth that our worth is not measured by what others whisper about us, but by what we choose to build with the time we have left. For anyone who has wondered if second chances are real, if trust can grow again in frozen soil, this story answers with a gentle but certain yes. So, as you let this tale rest in your memory, take a moment to think about who walks beside you, or who may yet be waiting just beyond the bend in your own trail. And if this story touched your heart, consider passing its warmth along. Share it with someone who might need reminding that love, respect, and belonging can still be found, even when the years seem heavy. In the end, the picture we carry is simple and enduring. Two figures on the frontier, no longer alone, proving that even in the hardest country, love can take root and grow.